Passchendaele you've worked on for a very long time. I've been hearing about this project for a long time, trying to get the money. It's a very expensive film in anyone's estimation, but in particularly in this country. And it's it's a period piece. It's all that stuff. Do you see yourself kind of in the James Cameron role of this, of sort of having to terrorize people into getting this film made?
If only there were studios to terrorize. No, I've never really thought of that. I think it's, but I do think it's true that because one of the co-producers was Neve Fishman, so it was really Neve and me, and then my partner Frank and Francis Stamberg, our Alberta producer. But it was one of those things where you pretty much had to be ready to kill somebody in order to make this movie. Otherwise, it just would never have happened, because the challenge of assembling the money for something like this was just insurmountable at first blush of it. It just seemed impossible. But it was an incredibly interesting journey. I mean, I think I started writing sketches of scenes about 12 years ago, and then really had a draft maybe about 10 years ago. But even though I was writing it, I knew we're not going to be able to make this for a while, because it's just whatever, the conditions aren't exactly right. But when we did get around to trying to do it, we sort of figured out that the only way to do it would, because we started looking at international co-productions, and they just don't work. If you want to make a purely Canadian film, going through an international co-prog, you can't do it. They have demands.
Yeah, if you get money from Belgium, they want scenes in Belgium, or they want Belgian actors or whatever.
It should be, well, why not have a British character as the main character?
Right.
There are a lot of restrictions, so we thought, well, we'll just have to do this domestically, and then there's just not enough money in the system for it. It caps out at about $8 million if you maximize everything. So we needed a lot more, and then that's when we started going to these weird sources. And I always thought that there was interest in the private sector in what we do, not in everything that we do, but a lot of what we do, in the business maybe in general. And there is. The system is almost hermetically sealed to deter them from ever being involved. So it was a very complex process to figure out how we could actually get them to come in. And there's a surprising amount of corporate money and private investment. And anyway, it was really, but the only thing that could get you to keep pushing all the way through that is that this is something that I desperately needed to make and wanted to see. I think making independent film anywhere in the world is hard. Making an independent film that is outside of the normal pattern is extraordinarily difficult. But you say we had a large budget, and it is big for Canadian, just in real dollars. But in terms of the ambition of the film versus, the normal picture, it is just considerably larger. So it's actually still a low-budget film. So all of the principles that you apply to shoot, which we all film with, be very as cheap as we can possibly be, maximize everything, long prep, don't waste. All of that still has to be applied. It's not as though we stumbled into studio money. Because we were at about 20 million Canadian, and if it were a U.S. studio, the floor would be 100. They wouldn't consider it for anything less. Yeah. So we were still, hanging on by our fingernails. But the margins of waste just don't exist.
Right.
The studio films are just horrifically wasteful. But well, most of the world makes independent films. It's really we're really kind of
we just live next door to the
movies and studio movies. I guess would be another way of putting it.
Yeah.
But Canadian film is always independent. And in a sense, auteur by its very nature, no matter what it is. I mean, maybe the filmmakers don't identify themselves that way, but it usually requires or is driven by one particular person saying, I need to tell this story.
Right. And figuring out a way to make it happen.
Yeah.
Right. And so let's sort of break that down a little bit then. So when you're trying to raise money for this, you talk about your dinner with billionaires. I mean, do you sort of see yourself as kind of, is it necessary because you are so well known to be kind of the face of this? I mean, people offering up money, they'd probably rather meet you than some nameless business guy who is producing, right?
Yeah, I'm the front man of the band, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were, I mean, there were a lot of people working on this.
Of course,
and, an awful lot of legwork that has to be done, and the follow-up calls, and kind of strategizing and working with the legal department to figure out how do we characterize the name of this company. It was very, very complex. But yeah, the kind of emotional pitch at the dinner would be mine.
Right. Passchendaele, I haven't seen it yet. No one has.
Or never will.
Very few people have. Just as we sit here today, you're still doing color correction and all that kind of stuff, just to be clear. But I have seen the trailers. I know there's a love story. There's a lot of elements here. It's not just a big sweeping, war epic of 2 hours of people shooting at one another on a field. Are those? Tell me just about the creation of it, because I know it was inspired by your grandfather on some level, and then all the sort of ancillary stories were put in, obviously with some kind of commercial considerations in mind, I would think.
The origins of the story were to do with my grandfather. He had served at the CF for pretty much the duration of the war, and he was wounded 3 times, the 3rd time at the Battle of Amiens in 1918, badly enough that he was sent home. And he had 5 daughters and no sons, and he didn't really talk to women about unpleasant trees like war, but he had a irritating grandson who would pester him. And one day he started to talk to me about it. And what he told me, the first story he told me actually is the opening scene in the film. The rest of it then is sort of compiled slightly out of some of his stories, but that particular summer, I think I was 16 or something, and that actually ignited my interest, and it was an amazing event when he first started talking about. We were fishing, and it's one of those times in your life, which we've all had, was sort of a hinge, and a door swung open onto adulthood and a life of consequence, and things were never really the same, for me anyway. And I've been interested in and reading about, and not sort of obsessively, but it's just a topic that's interested me a lot ever since. And somewhere along the line, I thought I'd like to do something with this. I'm not sure what. Whether I didn't think about a movie at first. I was thinking maybe a play, or But gradually, it started to feel like I should maybe make a film. And by the time I started writing the script, I'd read just the sheer tonnage of stuff I'd read about Stun of Ox at 100 paces. So it just started pouring out into this story, which slowly just unfolded on itself. I knew at some point that I wanted it to be domestic, and that it would be that for all of its size, is actually quite a small story. It's a few people together, and I thought it should be something about the casualties of war. Not just the battlefield casualties, but what happens to people who are left at home, people whose husbands die, people who have, and in this case, it also features some characters of German heritage, because it was of great interest to me. Part of my bloodline is German, part of my bloodline is United Kingdom. Right. And I thought it was so peculiar, like I would be at war with myself. Right. Asking my grandfather, what'd you want to do when you got over there? Oh, I couldn't wait to kill the Hun. How long did that last? About a week. Then I just wanted to get out of there. This was a formative period in our history. It's by no means an essay. It really is, a film with some romantic sweep and another in the long library of war films. But as I kind of started putting it together, the story kept unfolding almost on its own in this particular direction that you'll eventually get to see. And so it kind of comes back to the popularity idea of something. I would actively have had to try and deform the story, or to change the story that was emerging, to not have it have popular reach, if you understand what I'm saying.
Right.
So it certainly was not an exercise in sitting down and saying, well, and now we'll
give the main character a dog.
That's right. We'll put the dog. And, war can be savagely sad. But I think and that war was particularly bleak.
Yeah.